I've been through a lot of strange situations in my life. Things that would make most people double-check their locks at night. But this one still makes shivers run down my spine whenever I think about it. It started off like any other shift, the kind that feels so routine you stop paying attention to time altogether. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that dull, artificial glow over the aisles, and the hum of the refrigerators blended into the background like white noise. I was working the late shift alone, which wasn't unusual. Around 9 p.m., an older man came in. He moved slowly, like every step took effort, and he headed straight for the shelves near the back. I noticed him struggling to reach the top rack for a glass bottle we kept up high to discourage shoplifting. He stretched, missed, then tried again, his hand shaking slightly. I walked over and grabbed it for him before he could knock the whole row down. "Here you go," I said, handing it to him. He looked at me for a second longer than I expected, like he was trying to recognize me or memorize my face. Then he nodded, gave a quiet "thanks," and shuffled off to the counter. Nothing about it seemed strange at the time, just another customer. The rest of the evening dragged on the way slow nights do. A couple of customers came and went. Someone bought snacks, another guy got fuel and a drink. Small talk, cash register beeps, the usual rhythm. Outside, the parking lot was mostly empty except for a few parked cars and the occasional vehicle passing by on the road. By the time it hit closing hours, everything had settled into that eerie stillness you only notice when you're alone. I started my usual routine of counting the register, straightening the shelves, and turning off a few of the unnecessary lights. It was all muscle memory at that point. I barely had to think about it. Then I remembered the trash. It was always the last thing I did before locking up. I grabbed the bags from behind the counter and from the back room, tying them off and stacking them near the door. The smell wasn't great, but it was manageable. Just part of the job. I unlocked the front door and stepped outside, dragging the bags with me. The air hit me immediately. It was cooler than inside, and I was almost tempted to stay still for as long as I could. The parking lot lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the ground. Everything looked normal. Too normal, maybe. I hauled the first bag over to the dumpster and tossed it in. The sound echoed with a thud that bounced off the empty space around me. I grabbed the second bag and followed, trying not to think about how quiet everywhere was. That's when I heard it. A low, distant bark. I froze for a second, listening. If there was one thing I feared more than clowns even at my 22 years of age, it was dogs. I heard another bark. It was louder this time. It wasn't unusual for there to be dogs around the area. Some people let theirs roam at night, and there were always strays passing through. I told myself it was nothing, just a dog somewhere in the distance. I turned back toward the building, grabbing the last bag. As I walked further, I started hearing dogs barking in the distance. There was a roughness to it, like someone must have pissed this little guy off. I glanced around the parking lot. Still nothing. No movement, no shape, no sign of where the sound was coming from. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and started towards the dumpster again. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Night shifts do that to you sometimes. Your mind starts filling in gaps that aren't really there. I lifted the bag and tossed it in. The moment it hit the bottom, the barking intensified. I turned sharply, my heart jumping into my throat. From the far edge of the parking lot, near the darker stretch beyond the lights, something moved. At first, I couldn't make it out. Then it stepped into the light. A large dog. Bigger than anything I'd expected. It was staring directly at me, body tense, head low. Its ears were pinned back, and it let out another bark that echoed across the lot, deep and aggressive. For a second, neither of us moved. Then it took a step forward, and another. That was enough for me. I backed up slowly at first, trying not to trigger it, my eyes locked on the dog. My pulse was hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. Every instinct in my body was telling me to run, but I held back for a moment, hoping it would lose interest. It didn't. Instead, it broke into a sprint. That's when I ran. I turned and bolted toward the store, my shoes slamming against the pavement. Behind me, I could hear it, paws hitting the ground fast and heavy, closing the distance way too quickly. I didn't dare look back. The door suddenly felt miles away. I reached it, yanked it open, and practically threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. My hands fumbled with the lock, shaking so badly it took me a second to get it secured. The second it clicked, the dog hit the door, hard. The impact rattled the glass, making me stumble back. It barked again, louder than before, claws scraping against the surface as it tried to get in. I just stood there, breathing hard, staring at it. Up close, it looked even bigger. Its teeth were bared, its eyes fixed on me like I was the only thing in the world it cared about. It kept barking, pacing back and forth in front of the door. I didn't move, didn't even blink more than I had to. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a couple of minutes, it stopped. The barking cut off completely. The dog stood still for a moment, staring through the glass. Then, without warning, it turned and walked back into the darkness it came from. I stayed there, frozen, long after it disappeared, even after the parking lot was empty again, or even after everything was quiet. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I turned off the remaining lights, double-checked the locks, and grabbed my keys. Normally, I'd walk out to my car without thinking twice. That night, I hesitated. I stood by the door, listening, but I heard nothing. I cracked the door open slightly and peeked out. The lot was still empty. I stepped out slowly, every sense on edge. The walk to my car felt longer than it ever had before. I kept scanning the shadows, expecting to see that shape again, ready to come charging out of nowhere. But it never did. I got into my car, locked the doors immediately, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that the dog was lying in wait somewhere, waiting for the perfect opportunity to spring up on me. The next morning, I told a coworker about it. He just shrugged and said there'd been reports of a big stray dog in the area. Apparently, it had been seen hanging around at night, getting aggressive with people who got too close. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because I couldn't stop thinking about the way it looked at me. Most problems don't start out big. They start small. Something would go missing here. Something else would go out of place there. It was easy to ignore at first, easy to laugh off. But this was the kind of thing that slowly turns everyone against each other. And for a while, I was sure I was going to be the one blamed for it. It started off like any normal week. Same routine, same faces, same late-night quiet that settles in once the rush dies down. I worked with a small team, and most of us had been there long enough to get comfortable with each other. Too comfortable, maybe. People left their stuff around all the time. Snacks in the break area, drinks in the mini-fridge, half-eaten food tucked into plastic bags with names scribbled on them. Nobody really worried about it. It was one of those unspoken rules. You just didn't touch what wasn't yours. At least that's how it used to be. The first time something went missing, nobody made a big deal out of it. One of the guys complained that his chicken strips were gone. He swore he left them in the back fridge, still warm, still sealed. We joked that he probably just forgot where he put them. He laughed it off, but I could tell it bothered him more than he let on. Then it happened again. This time it was a drink. Then someone's sandwich. Then a whole bag of snacks. Little things at first, but they kept adding up. And the weird part? It wasn't happening during busy hours, it was always overnight, during my shift. At first, nobody said anything directly to me, but you can tell when people start thinking things and drawing conclusions in their end. Conversations get muted when you walk in. Our jokes start having that edge to them. Someone would say, "Man, I hope my food's still there," and glance in your direction just a second too long. I tried to ignore it, but it kept happening. Every few nights, something else would disappear, and every time, it was when I was on shift. I started double-checking everything, making sure I wasn't missing something obvious. Maybe someone was throwing things out by mistake. Maybe food was getting moved and forgotten. Perhaps we had a rat in the convenience store. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Someone was taking it, and for a while, I was the easiest person to blame. One night, one of my coworkers confronted me directly. Not aggressive, not loud. He just seemed to be getting tired of the same old prank. "Hey, man," he said, leaning against the counter. "You sure you haven't seen anything?" That question hung in the air for a while. I told him no, because I hadn't, but the look on his face told me he wasn't fully convinced. That was the night I decided I was done just guessing. If something was happening during my shift, I was going to figure out what it was. The next few nights, I paid attention to everything. I stopped zoning out during the quiet hours. Every sound, every movement, every door opening, I noticed all of it. I checked the back room more often. I watched the surveillance cameras when I had time, but I found nothing suspicious. No little mice coming out to plan after dark. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Then one night, right around the same time things usually went missing, I heard something. A faint noise from the back. I stood still behind the counter, listening. There it was again. A soft shuffle. I walked toward the back slowly, my chest tightening a little with each step. The lights back there were dimmer, casting long shadows along the walls. The door to the storage area was slightly open. I knew I hadn't left it like that. For a second, I just stood there. Then I pushed it open. The room looked empty at first. Shelves, boxes, the small fridge in the corner, everything exactly where it should be. Then something moved, right behind the shelf. I stepped forward, my heart starting to pound. "Hello!" I called out. No one responded. I took another step, and that's when he stood up. Out of nowhere, a man, thin, dirty. His clothes looked worn down like they hadn't been changed in days. He froze the second he saw me, like a deer caught in headlights. In his hand was a half-eaten sandwich. For a second, neither of us said anything. I just stared at him, and he stared right back. Then, without warning, he bolted. He shoved past me, moving faster than I expected, and ran straight for the back exit. By the time I turned around, he was already gone, just like that. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to process what just happened. Then I looked down at the floor. Wrappers, empty containers, stuff that had been missing for days. That's when it clicked. It wasn't one incident. It had been him the whole time. The next day, everything came out. I told my manager what happened, and we checked the cameras properly. Sure enough, there were moments we'd missed before. Small gaps where someone slipped in through the back when it wasn't fully secured. It had been happening for a while. Long enough for people to start pointing fingers. Long enough for me to almost get blamed for it. The owner came in later that week. He wasn't happy. Not at all. The idea that someone had been sneaking in and taking things right under our noses didn't sit well with him. For a moment, it felt like everyone's job was on the line, including mine. Then something unexpected happened. A couple of nights later, the same guy came back. This time, the owner was there. And just like before, the guy didn't realize he'd been seen until it was too late. He had food in his hands again, looked just as tired, just as worn down. The owner didn't yell, didn't call the police. He just called him aside and talked to him. I wasn't close enough to hear everything, but I caught bits and pieces. The guy had nowhere to go, had been sleeping wherever he could. I'd said he wasn't trying to cause trouble, he just needed something to eat. For a while, nobody said anything. Then the owner did something none of us expected. He offered him a job. Nothing big. Just small tasks, cleaning, stocking, enough to get him on his feet. And just like that, everything changed. No more missing food, no more tension, no more side glances. The problem was gone. We even became good friends. But even now, something about it still feels kinda weird. Because I remember how quickly people started looking at me differently, how easy it was for suspicion to build without proof, how close I came to being the one everyone blamed. And sometimes, when I see him working now, looking all dapper and decent, wearing the same uniform as the rest of us, it still doesn't fully register. That this normal-looking guy is the same one who used to slip in through the back, watching, waiting, taking things when no one was paying attention. If you're ever thinking about working any job that involves dealing with the public, here's something you should know. You're going to meet all kinds of people. Some are polite, some are forgettable, some are exhausting. And then there are the ones who leave an impression you never asked for. This particular encounter still ranks as one of the strangest I've ever experienced. I worked full-time at a gas station for several years in my 30s. Toward the end of my time there, I started noticing a particular guy who came in every few days like clockwork. There was something about him that was hard to define. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, haunted by something I couldn't see. His eyes were sunken and distant, not unfocused exactly, but fixed on things that didn't seem to exist for anyone else. His movements were quick, or restless, like he was constantly bracing for something just out of frame. Every time he came in, he scanned the store before grabbing a couple of snacks and heading straight for the counter. He never lingered, never browsed. It was always in and out. He paid with cash, exact change, always counted out before he even reached me. The entire interaction was silent. No greeting, no eye contact longer than necessary. He would place the money on the counter, take his items, and leave without a word. I didn't think much of it at first. Overnight shifts attract all kinds of personalities, and he never caused problems. If anything, he looked like someone trying very hard not to disturb anyone. Then one night, something changed. He walked in around 2 a.m., but instead of heading toward the snack aisle like usual, he began pacing, back and forth, from one aisle to the next. He moved quickly, stopping abruptly as if he'd forgotten what he was doing. His hands rubbed together nervously, and his head turned in short, sharp movements, like he was listening for something. It quickly caught my attention because he had never stayed longer than 2 minutes before. I glanced out the front windows toward the pumps. There were no cars or headlights in sight. The station sat far enough off the road that no one would reasonably walk there unless they had a specific reason. Seeing him inside without a vehicle didn't make sense. When I looked back at him, he was still pacing. Trying to keep my tone light, I called out, "Hey, you okay? Need me to call someone for you?" He froze in his tracks and slowly turned to face me. His expression was strained. His eyes looked hollow, like they hadn't closed in days. But it wasn't anger, it was something else. Fear, maybe. Without answering, he rushed toward the exit and stepped outside. Instead of heading toward a car, he walked straight past the pumps and continued toward the road until he disappeared into the darkness. The whole thing left me unsettled. The next night, it happened again. And the moment I tried to speak to him, he bolted. By then, I wasn't irritated. I was concerned. There was a difference between someone being odd and someone looking like they were unraveling. But on the third night, he returned to normal. He walked in calmly, grabbed his usual snacks, placed exact cash on the counter, and left without a word. It was as if the previous 2 nights had never happened. Still, the image of him pacing lingered in my mind. Working overnight trains you to read people without realizing it. The rhythm of their movements, the way they react to space and sound. With him, it felt like he was trying not to be noticed, like he wanted to shrink into the fluorescent light and disappear. After that, I started paying closer attention. During slow periods, I'd rewind security footage just to watch his movements again. On camera, it looked even stranger. Short bursts of motion, sudden pauses, moments where he tilted his head slightly, as though listening to something just beyond the microphone's reach. I mentioned him casually to a coworker the next day. They shrugged it off. "Overnight crowds always weird," they said. Maybe they were right. Still, every time I thought about him, it felt like an unfinished sentence. Like something had started, but never reached its conclusion. A week passed without him showing up. Then, on a quiet Wednesday night, I saw headlights pull into the lot. He parked this time. He stepped out slowly and walked inside, stopping in the middle of the store. His face looked devoid of emotions, like someone still trying to wake up from a long dream. He appeared more worn than usual. Not frantic, not pacing, just drained. He stood there for a moment before heading to the snack aisle. I tried not to stare, but he stayed inside for nearly 10 minutes before approaching the counter. That alone was strange. He had never taken that long. When he finally set a small bag of chips down, his movements were deliberate, slower than I'd ever seen. He handed me the cash without urgency. After I rang him up, he picked up the bag and, in a quiet voice, said, "Thank you." I'd seen him dozens of times. That was the first word I'd ever heard him say. I watched him walk back outside toward his truck. He reached the door, stepped out into the night, and paused. For just a second. Then it happened. He ran towards his car and hit the car repeatedly. I ran towards him to stop him, but he hopped into his car and drove away. The following morning, my coworker told me she learned that he'd been taken to a specialized care center. The poor guy had lost his wife just a few weeks after their wedding, and it had slowly caused him to lose his grip on reality. He was staying with his parents, who had kept a closer eye on him before he ran off with his father's car. I stood frozen behind the counter, trying to process what I'd just heard. I have no clue just what happened to him, because the poor guy never came back. Sometimes, during slow overnight shifts, I still think about the way he paced those aisles, like someone counting down to something only he understood. I don't know what he was running from, but whatever it was, it finally caught up to him. If these stories had your heart pounding just a little faster, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload.